Welcome to those of you that are joined. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen and share a few slides. Hi, Inga. Thanks for putting your camera on. Nice to see you. Yeah. So I'm going to just share some slides and give an overview of the MBCT program and the teacher training program, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. Yeah. How's everyone doing? Yeah, it's good to see everyone. MBCT, yeah? And then sometimes people are like, MBCT, MBSR, I'm not sure which. So when we come to a question and answer, I teach and train in both of those programs. So I'm happy to talk about both of those. So let me go over a little bit about the program first, and then we can have a dialogue. So I'm going to present on the MBCT program and the certificate in MBCT teaching. And as I mentioned, some of you may have questions about MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I'm happy to talk about that as well when we move into the question and answer session. So let me tell you a little bit about the MBCT program to begin with. So let me just get a sense. See if I can see more people. How many here are familiar with MBCT, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy, the program, right? So MBCT is different from bringing mindfulness into traditional CBT or cognitive therapy. It's a specific program that was developed. So that's what we're talking about, because that's what we train and teach here. So let me tell you a little bit about that. And welcome to those of you that are joining. Let me just minimize this. Yeah. So MBCT, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy, was developed in the late 1990s, and it was developed by three individuals, Zindel Siegel, Mark Williams, and John Tisdale. Let me just make sure. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Okay, just want to make sure. I want to make sure we're recording for the people that aren't able to be here. So it was developed by John, Mark, and Zindel. And all three of these individuals were experts and are experts in the fields of depression, research into depression. They were all cognitive therapists, psychologists, and researchers. Mark and John are in the UK. At the time that they developed the program, Mark was at Oxford University and John was at Cambridge University, and Zindel Siegel is up in Toronto. And Zindel actually received a MacArthur grant to develop the program. And so the goal was to prevent relapse in people with recurrent depression by combining cognitive therapy principles with mindfulness training and practices. So by the late 1990s, of course, CBT and cognitive therapy had really taken hold and the research was very strong. And John, Mark, and Zindel were interested in both developing a group-based modality to make the program more scalable, but also at the time, in the very beginning, they were really looking at individuals that were experiencing recurrent episodes of depression. As I'll mention later, the research into MBCT now is also quite strong for anxiety and really many challenging mood states. The mechanisms are the same. But through their research into depression and recurrent depression in particular, they were really looking to provide individuals an opportunity to develop what they thought were key skills: attention regulation and decentering. So decentering is that capacity to be aware of our experience, but step aside of it so that we're not as fused or identified with it. It's not about dissociation. It's not about denial. It's not about suppression or repression. So it's a way of being with experience, but being disidentified with it. And so that allows some space and perhaps a change in perspective and a change in experience. And so at the time, MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, developed by John Kabat-Zinn, had really also taken hold here in the US. And John had done a lot of research, excuse me, by that time on MBSR. And for those of you that are clinicians might be interested in this, is as they were putting the program together, Marcia Linehan, who developed DBT. Excuse me for a moment. Marsha Linehan, who, as many of you may know, developed DBT, and it has one of the skills, mindfulness, was doing a postdoc fellow at Oxford, and she learned about what they were doing, and she's like, oh, yeah, you really are looking at the mechanisms of mindfulness. And she actually suggested that they go and talk with John Kabat-Zinn, who at the time was at the University of Massachusetts Center for Mindfulness. So they actually went there and they talked with John, and they learned a little bit about MBSR. They took a couple of the classes, and they really liked what they saw. At the time, they weren't yet sure that the teacher themselves needed to have a mindfulness practice. So they went back and they designed something, and they put it together, and they started researching it, and it didn't quite yield the results that they expected that it would. And so they went back actually to the Center for Mindfulness, met with John, and took the entire 8-week program. And it was during that second visit that they really noticed a number of things, that they really appreciated the structure and the systematic training in mindfulness that happens in MBSR. And so MBCT is built on the platform or on the foundation of MBSR. And they came to realize, and the research now bears this out, that the teacher's own personal mindfulness practice and mindful presence during the class, and how they're relating and how they're investigating and exploring individuals' experience, is essential to supporting people in developing the aims that MBCT tries to achieve, it aims to achieve. And so the key insights that have both been developed and that they were looking into when they developed the program, in terms of how to prevent the intensity, the frequency, and or the duration of recurrent depressive episodes, really looked at the training of awareness of thoughts and feelings. And in MBCT, those of you familiar with mindfulness or MBSR know that we often talk about thoughts and body sensations and emotions. And in MBCT, we add impulses to act. So we add an additional, because that's important, because that impulse to do something about our experience is actually what contributes to both exacerbating or maintaining distressing states or depressive patterns. As human beings, we all naturally have this tendency towards experiential avoidance of that which we don't want. With anxiety and depression, for example, there's ruminative thinking, this way of trying to think our way out of what we're experiencing. It might be behavioral. So MBCT aims to both highlight and bring into awareness these patterns, aims to support people in recognizing thinking, because often we're very fused or identified with our thinking, in particular paying attention to negative thoughts and negative moods and the interplay and the overlap that they have and how they can contribute to downward spirals in mood. And also to notice how there is this automatic reactivity to move away from this avoidance. And it's in doing that that there might be a prolonging of the experience or intensification. So they were looking to develop, in general, a different relationship with all experience, particularly difficult experience, supporting people to recognize, not just intellectually understand, but recognize, see, experience habitual patterns of this experiential avoidance that can worsen challenging mind and mood states. And to support people to develop strategies and skill and capacity to disengage from automatic negative thought patterns. So with MBCT, unlike what might be happening in CBT, there's not necessarily an active working with the content of the thought. It's more becoming aware of the presence of thinking, seeing these thoughts as patterns and relating to them differently. And so like John did with MBSR, Zindelmark and John Tisdale immediately started researching MBCT when they started implementing it. And so the evidence base is very strong. In fact, so much so that MBCT is in the National Health Services for the UK and Canada as treatment is normal for mild to moderate depression. So this is Zindel, Mark, and John, for those of you that have never met them. And Zindel Siegel, as I'll mention, I trained with Zindel, and Zindel has consulted with us from the development of our training program and co-teaches with me in one of the training classes. So what is MBCT, for those of you that might not be familiar with it? So MBCT, as it's designed, is a group modality. It's a structured, curriculum-based, 8-week evidence-based program. John, Mark, and Zindel also wrote a book that some of you may be familiar with, The Mindful Way Through Depression. People often find their way to the class through that book. It's written for the individual that might be living with depression, and people will say to me, oh, I found myself, I saw myself in that book. And it mentions MBCT. And so they also developed a workbook, the Mindful Way Through Depression workbook. And so some clinicians and educators are working with individuals on an individual basis that might not want to be part of a group with MBCT in that way. But as it's been researched, it's intended as a group modality, and the group is very strong. The group cohesion, the group learning, the normalization of living with depression and anxiety and challenging mind and mood states. It's like often participants share that they hoped to get something out of the program. They didn't expect how much they received from being part of the group and learning from each other. So it's 8 weeks. The protocol is 2.25 hours. At Brown University, when we run our MBCT classes, we run them at 2.5 hours with a break because that aligns with MBSR, and it just keeps the schedules aligned. And it's highly experiential in nature. So that first hour or throughout the class, we're engaged in systematic training in foundational mindfulness meditation practices. There's also brief practices in MBCT and informal practices. So we systematically move through these foundational practices of body scan, these different ways that we can work with our attention, a focused attention, such as awareness of breath or an anchoring of attention on anchors that feel safe and stable and are of the choice of the person. And then moving towards a more open awareness, or what you may see in the research referred to as open monitoring awareness. Mindful movement, so different gentle stretching, different gentle yoga as a mindfulness practice. And then a brief practice that's built on throughout the curriculum, the 3-minute breathing space, and also informal practices. So bringing mindfulness into your daily life through maybe having a meal, or being on the lookout for pleasant experiences, or engaging in a daily activity. So all these different ways that individuals can start to cultivate this quality of mindful presence and awareness that allows them to both see more clearly their experience and learn the nature of the mind in general, the nature of their mind, and the common tendencies of the mind that can contribute to downward spirals of mood or anxiety, stress, or challenge. But also experience a broadening of perspective that they might also experience, and a reconnection with joy and pleasure and a sense of mastery, things that often people lose through these conditions. And so MBCT then also includes cognitive activities that are facilitated as awareness practices. So these are intended to help people really start to see these natural patterns of thinking we engage in. Something happens and we automatically make some assumptions or some interpretations, and we're missing the thinking. So we slow the process down so people can start to see this. In MBCT, we might not teach explicitly, for example, cognitive distortions, but we do look at common thoughts that people have when they're depressed or when they're anxious, and we see who experiences these. And it's very healing and very therapeutic for people to realize, oh, it's not just me. But then it also starts to support individuals to realize, wait a minute, these thoughts that I so readily identify as me, which often happens with depression, going from I made a mistake to I am a mistake, for example. When we start to gain the capacity, a metacognition, if you will, to be able to see the thought patterns, then we have a better chance of responding to them differently. And so we use the in-class mindfulness meditation practices and the home practices to explore and investigate personal experiences and what people are learning as we sort of travel through this arc of the curriculum. So MBCT moves through this content. So we're scaffolding in terms of a person's ability to pay attention, to cultivate awareness, to be with, develop a little bit of distress tolerance for difficulty and challenge, while we're looking at this content of autopilot versus awareness, living in our heads, gathering a scattered attention, recognizing aversion, allowing and letting be. Thoughts are not facts. How can we best take care of ourselves? And then carrying the learning forward. And so we move through this curriculum in this way. And then between sessions, there's homework. There's mindfulness meditation practices. And for some people, they can feel very long. Some of the practices are 30 minutes. And so we work individually with each person about what they're able to do. But also we work a lot in class with, if we're doing for home practice a 30-minute body scan, and after 5 minutes, you're like, I can't do this. That's great opportunity to just notice how we're reacting to something that's not going the way that we want, to something that's really hard, to encountering challenging material, challenging experiences, and to, in that moment, find new and different ways to respond. It may include continuing with the practice. It may include discontinuing the practice, but less from a reactive, avoidant way and more from a thoughtful, intentional way. And so the body of evidence on MBCT is very strong and continues to be strong. I'm just going to summarize generally what we're seeing in the research. So we're seeing that for prevention, it works. MBCT substantially reduces the risk of depressive relapse, and it performs comparably in a few meta-analyses to antidepressant medications. And it surpasses treatment as usual. It's effective also for current symptom relief. It's been looked at for mild to moderate current symptoms, helping people cope differently, helping people respond differently, helping people to stay engaged with supports and supportive networks. There's been some research, particularly in the UK, where it's more widely implemented in terms of, one, because of it's a group-based modality, the economic nature of the modality as well, right? So it allows it to be scalable, it allows it to be accessible. This is one of the reasons why we're offering teacher training at Brown, because the evidence is so strong. We want it to be as readily available as possible for that individuals who might be wanting it and seeking it and appropriate for it are able to find an MBCT teacher in their community. And then there are some studies showing that for some individuals that other treatments just haven't worked, MBCT does offer some promise and some support and some success. So our certificate program, I'll run through this and then I'll come off and we can have a conversation. So at Brown, we have, well, let me stop first. I'm going to stop sharing and just ask if there's any questions about MBCT first. I want to see who's here. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Any questions about the program itself, the 8-week program? Has anybody taken MBCT? Jamie, you have? Yeah. Does that sound aligned with your experience? Yeah.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Hi,
No,
Patty.
please.
A quick question I have is, so I'm currently in the MBSR class,
Yeah.
So I'm looking at so this class, I want to get trained on this one too, but sounds like there are a lot of overlap information. And also I'm a counselor practice from the CBT standpoint. So I'm just wondering, what would be the major like difference between this program and also the MS, the stress reduction one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer that and I'll come back to the program. So Zindel Siegel once described when he was on our speaker series. So MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, really looks at suffering and stress in general. And a lot of the research on MBSR, initial research was on pain, but a lot of stress-related health conditions. And so the arc of that curriculum, for those that are familiar with it, is really looking at stress psychology, stress physiology, how we experience stress in the body and reactivity in the body, right? So it's more broad and more general. And so that teacher training program is more broad and more general. The requirements are different than we have in MBCT. And people that come might be broader and general. So for people that are interested and eligible for both programs, the question for you is, oh, where do you feel most alive and pulled towards? And who do you work with and who do you plan to teach? MBCT then really is considered the first adaptation of MBSR, and it takes a more narrow focus. We are looking very specifically at our emotional lives. We are looking very specifically at depression and anxiety and contributing factors. In many ways, MBCT is much more explicit and includes a bit more opportunity for psychoeducation or didactic to support people in sort of making the connection. We're still using our mindfulness practice, and mindfulness is still the main mode of intervention, if you will. But we're really looking at, when all is said and done, always asking the question, what does this have anything to do with times when you're feeling depressed or anxious? How might this be helpful or not be helpful? So, for example, if you've taken MBSR or if you've taken any mindfulness program, the raisin activity is pretty common, right? Walking someone through like the raisin. We do this in MBCT too, right? So we do this in the first class of MBCT. But when we're inquiring at the end, we're asked, what does this have to do with depression? How might paying attention in this way have any relationship to when you're feeling depressed or anxious? How is it to shift your attention from different senses? How might that relate to both helping you stay well, right? We start to really zero in on that. And we include cognitive activities that really look at modes of mind. We sort of take a look at tendencies, sort of confirmation bias and the discrepancy monitoring mode. We look at particular thought patterns. We look at, like when we're exploring thoughts, so this would be in class 4 or 5, and we're asking people, like we put up thoughts on a whiteboard, here are common thoughts that people have when they're depressed. Here are common when people have when they're anxious. So we're not teaching cognitive distortion. We're talking about the thoughts. And then we're like, what ones ring true for you? What does it mean that we have a list like this that's so readily available, right? It's like, oh, it's like, right, these are thoughts. All these people have, and then we're like, just talking about these thoughts, just thinking about them. Then we come into mindfulness. It's like, what's happening in your experience right now? What are you aware of? Because typically what we notice is the whole mood of the class drops a little bit. It's like, what are you aware of in the body? What are you aware of in your mood? It's like, wow, just even thinking about these, look at the connection and look at what's happening, because this is going on all the time. And when we're not able to recognize it, we miss maybe the opportunity to interrupt the start of a downward spiral or the start of anxiety, right? So we're trying to help people get right at that first chain in terms of, oh, pause, know what's going on, and maybe make a different choice. So in every class, we're exploring that. So the focus is a little bit more narrow. So often people might come from MBSR and they'll be like, I really want to talk about depression. or I really want to talk about my anxiety. Or some people will be from MBCT. They're like, I really want to strengthen my practice. So I think I'm going to, I think I want to do MBSR next to help. Does that help answer your question?
Makes sense. Makes sense. Sounds like the MBSR is kind of foundation where we learn about the mindfulness, kind of get awareness, kind of basics. But going to this program is more kind of narrow, specific focus on the like you said, kind of dive deeper, kind of.
Yeah, we're really looking at applying it to our mind and mood states.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Right.
Thank you for the
So
explanation.
yeah, it could the practices are identical, maybe a little bit shorter in MBCT. Class one is identical. And then a lot of it depends on like who you're going to teach. What we're finding, and at Brown, we're not a clinical site, so this is true, but what we're finding is more and more people are drawn to MBCT also. One, because we didn't know about it. It took off in Canada and the UK. It did not take off in the United States the way the other program has. I think in part John was here and the research was here, and in the UK the research is there because MBCT has been around since the 90s. But people are really anxious these days, and people are really depressed. Depression is still the number one public health issue. And people may not have a diagnosis of depression, but people are chronically sad. And people have a sense that there's something about the way that they're approaching their experience that's contributing to that. And they're not sure how to break free. And so, one of the things that we share with people is that it doesn't necessarily mean you're never going to experience depression or anxiety again, which is what everyone comes to the class and wants, of course, right? So everyone's like, oh, that's very disappointing. I'm like, yes, I know. But you might find a different way of being and living with it. I share an example that I'll share with you all that highlighted this for me. One of my very early MBCT classes, I had a gentleman in the class who had a really long-standing history with depression, was hospitalized a few times, excuse me, had come to the class, really engaged. And then around the middle of the class, started to get more and more quiet. And then around class 5 or 6, he was really quiet. And after one of the practices, I just sort of checked in with him and he started crying. And so nobody swooped in to fix him or make him feel better. We all like we're gaining the capacity to just hold this, to be with our own strong emotions while someone else is experiencing strong emotions. And he said that he had realized a week earlier that he was starting to experience signs of depression, and that he was thinking about that, and that was making him even more depressed because he's like he never wanted to experience. And so he was also seeing how his thoughts were contributing. But he said that the day before the class is he went out to run an errand, and he went to get in his car, and as he was getting in his car, he happened to notice his neighbor's tree and the way the light was hitting the tree. And then he said, so I became aware that I was smiling. He's like, literally, it's from this class. I felt the smile on my face. I don't think I ever was in touch with my body like that. I felt that I was smiling, and I heard myself have the thought, wow, that's pretty. And he said, it never occurred to me that I could be experiencing depression and moments of joy at the same time. Right. So it's that kind of shift in perspective from an experiential point of view that the program is offering people. Any other questions on what I will say as I jump into the teacher training pathway now is taking the program personally is the first prerequisite for the teacher training program. You take it personally for a couple of reasons. You want to strengthen your mindfulness practice. How do you know that you want to invest your valuable resources in a training program of something you don't know? So you want to take the program personally. And when you do that, a number of things may happen. You may be like, oh, I loved that. I learned a lot. Or I didn't love that. That may be an option. And I deepened my practice. I can find ways to bring it into my work, but I don't think I ever want to teach that program or deliver that program. Good to know, right? Then the first training class is the Foundations in Mindfulness Facilitator. This is probably the heaviest lift, and I'm going to show a graphic so that you can see it. The MBCT Foundations and Facilitator. And for those of you that are like, what about MBSR? This is also true for MBSR. The pathways map on each other training-wise a little bit. I think the Foundations on Facilitators training class is the heaviest lift time-wise. It's 10 weeks long, but you're back in a second MBCT class. So you're in a second MBCT class one day or evening, and then just the trainees, and in MBCT, it's typically a smaller cohort, just the trainees are in a training seminar where we use that lived experience to very comprehensively and systematically unpack the curriculum. First, starting with your experience. Like, what was your experience of class one? Then using the text and using the curriculum, we're like, so what's happening in session one? What are we doing in session two? What are the practices that we're doing? What are the activities? What's the content? How are we scaffolding? Because we look at the building of the arc. And so it's interesting because like some people will take the class and then come immediately into foundation. So they're back right in another class, sometimes with me, or sometimes they're with my colleague, Bill. And we'll be going through something, and in foundations, they'll be like, that walking down the street exercise was really interesting. You didn't do that the first time. I'm like, yeah, I did. So it's amazing what we missed the first time. So when you're in the class the second time, you're in there as a participant observer. You're still there as a participant, but you have like an open awareness perspective that you're also paying attention to what's going on in the class, because that's what we're unpacking. At the end of that training program, we also spend a little bit of time in that program looking at what might a shorter program look like, either an introductory program, or if you have clients that you're like, I don't think they're going to do 8 weeks, 2.25 hours. I just like, or you're in a setting, we talk a little bit about like using, now that you've done a deeper dive into the curriculum and you know it better inward, inside and out, what might a shorter program look like? What might like a 4-week, 1-hour program look like based on MBCT? And you receive the Credley Badge of Mindfulness Facilitator, because during that course, you also guide briefly foundational practices, body scan, breathing space, mindful movement, and then a 20-minute interactive, both presentation and guided practice. What is mindfulness? Sort of through the lens of MBCT, and a focused attention practice. And we use the MBI TAC, which was developed out of Oxford, the Mindfulness-Based Intervention Teaching Assessment Competencies, that list the 6 domains of competency for teaching mindfulness-based groups. We use that in a self-reflection way so that you have some feedback, because we're also looking at trauma sensitivity as it applies to practice, so that you feel like you've got some skill and some competence and some feedback in bringing practice into your work. So that's the first training program, first training class. And so some people stop there. Some people are like, that's all I actually want. I don't think I ever want to teach the 8-week program. And then some people are like, I want that, and I want to teach the 8-week program. So the next class is the MBI TAC, Teacher Advancement Intensive. This is 5 days. Yeah, Inga.
Okay, hi. I'm also on my phone. I had to
Yeah.
log in. I had to log in on the way to coming. So so the certificate, to get the certificate,
Yeah.
that's what you're going into now. It's
Yeah.
like first, if you haven't done it, you take the 8-week course yourself.
Yeah.
But then from what I remember looking up, there's like 4 other modules.
Yeah,
So you're kind of going into
yeah,
that's what you're explaining, right? Okay,
yeah,
okay, I just wanted to make
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and let me put up the graphic from our website so that you can see it. Right, so here on this slide, it's just so our training program has two primary aims at Brown. We train only in the evidence-based practices, and so we wanted to train in the two foundational practices, MBSR and MBCT. Also, we wanted to deepen the teacher's mindfulness practice, knowing the importance of that in teaching the programs. And then for our program, as I mentioned, Zindel's been involved in both consulting with the development and in training when he can. So I look at our pathway, the MBCT pathway, as having two steps. Getting to qualified level, which gets you teaching independently, generating revenue, and then certified, which can take longer. And I'll walk through it and then I'll show you a graphic. The qualified is these two training programs, two training classes, I should say, two classes. And then after completing these, you're able to start teaching if you successfully complete them. To complete the certificate program, it can take longer. And what takes longer is you need to teach the 8-week program a minimum of 4 times independently. So you need to be thinking about and have places on where you would teach. One of those classes would be with individual mentoring. And there are 2 additional classes, the Ethos of Mindfulness-Based Programs and Dialogue and Inquiry, which are shared with both certificate program. So the certificate program can take a few years, depending on resources, depending on teaching, but you could be teaching relatively quickly, depending on the timing of when you enter the pathway. And then for MBSR, you also need to have 3 mindfulness-based silent retreats. We don't prescribe when you need to have them. You just need to have them before you get to the certified level. MBSR is different. They have placements on where you would need that. You would need it first before doing their foundations, and then they also have 4. Prerequisites for MBCT are also your own personal practice. You need to have started a practice. 2 years is preferred, 1 year is considered. You need to have a graduate degree or education in a helping profession. So you need to have some professional experience working with individuals that might be coming to your program. So that might be a counselor, social work, psychology, it might be healthcare, it might be education. MBSR is much wider in terms of who's eligible to teach MBSR because we're looking specifically at some of these challenging mind and mood states, and because of people who may want to come to the class. We want people to have some experience with that. You need to have some understanding of cognitive behavioral therapy. We don't teach it, but you have to have some understanding of the framework of it because it's implicit in MBCT, and you need to complete the course personally. So what does this look like? So this is what the getting to the qualified level looks like. And I often encourage people to think about this because that gets you teaching. And at the end of this, you say you're a trained MBCT teacher through Brown. You don't need to say you're a qualified MBCT teacher. That may ask people maybe like, well, why would you market yourself as an unqualified teacher? But you haven't completed the certificate program. So there's the mindfulness facilitator status, and then there's the qualified MBCT teacher. So here's your prerequisites. Take the class personally. You have professional and educational experience in a helping profession. You complete the foundations. You receive the status of mindfulness facilitator. The prerequisites of teaching 3 introductory programs, we often waive this because it depends on the timing of things. This is if you've never taught mindfulness personally, or you might want to do some introductory programs. We want you to have some experience doing this publicly or with clients. And then you take the teacher advancement intensive. So the teacher advancement intensive is 5 days. It goes from a Friday evening, like 6 to 8:30, full days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, usually starting at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time with practice, going to about 7 at night, plenty of spaces for breaks, and then Tuesday to midday. Zindel Siegel joins me for half days for this training, and our next TAI with Zindel is scheduled April 17th through the 21st. And after completing that, you're a qualified MBCT teacher. To complete the full certificate program, so I just talked about getting you here, you take these two other courses that I mentioned, Dialogue and Inquiry and the Ethos. This goes, we talk about the underpinnings of mindfulness-based programs in the foundations course, but we do a much deeper dive. So the underpinnings are the contemplative teachings and practices. So this is taught by one of our adjunct teachers that are also a trained retreat teacher. So we're looking at the underlying contemplative pedagogy of mindfulness-based programs. There's a section on the science taught by one of our research staff. Then we look at experiential education because the program is grounded in experiential education. It's not a didactic program. And group process, we look at the frames of trauma sensitivity and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. In Dialogue and Inquiry, we look at this way that we have, that we do of investigating our experience. So it's different from what you might do in a psychotherapy or a health education or a counseling session. And we're not just role modeling how we're approaching individuals' experiences. We're generally coming from a place of mindful presence and curiosity and interest about people's experience. So we're not looking for a particular outcome. We're not looking for a particular experience. People often be like, oh, this was a really bad practice. My mind was so busy. And we're like, oh, what did you like? We sort of help people start tracking the movement of the mind and the impact that that has on them, and the language that they're using and the labels that they're putting on themselves. And what is it like to meet yourself and the experience with openness and genuine interest and compassion? And how might that support a shift in how you see yourself and a shift in how you experience? So I'm going to stop here and open it up now for questions.
I have another two questions
Yeah.
if everyone don't mind to ask. So first question is because right now I haven't take the prerequisite yet. So I guess just out of curiosity to complete the entire program till the last point where I will get certified as a MBCT teacher. How long in general people will take to get there?
Yeah, it probably could take about 2 years because it's the teaching. Like so we've had 40 people. Like the MBCT program is relatively new. We work to get the MBSR teacher training program through the curriculum committee here. It's not a degree. It's not a credit bearing program, but it was new to the School of Professional Studies. And then we brought the MBCT program in. So often where people start to take some time is holding classes. It depends on where they can. And then also right now, this may change, but right now we've been offering the TAI once a year because we work around Zindel Siegel's schedule, and it depends on the numbers. So we have TAI scheduled in April, and we don't have another one scheduled yet. I'm talking to Zindel about his availability for, we're thinking of maybe doing a second one in 2026.
Makes sense. And the follow-up question on that is, in total, how much the cost would be in order to finish all the classes? Because I feel like that would be another deciding
Yeah,
factor for many of us too.
yeah. And our let me bring you to the page. Bear with me for a moment. So on our website, if you go under academics, you'll see mindfulness education. I'll put the link in the chat so you can bookmark it. And you come to Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy Teacher Training Certificate. The registration and the cost is right here. So here's the breakdown of the costs. You can take it class by class. And then I also point out here that we have a form to request some tuition assistance. And to the extent that we can, we try to meet these. And I encourage people to complete these because we try to meet these as best we can. So I'm going to put this link in the chat for everyone so that you can bookmark it. Yeah, Barbara.
Hello, everybody. Is there any national standards or a national registry? I've seen your program, UMass, and then I saw one in San Diego. But if someone came, how would they, is there any national standards or a national registry?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So we, like, in terms of our program, we use the MBI TAC in terms of the competencies, because that's what other training institutions internationally use. UCSD is not doing MBCT training right now.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. UMass doesn't do teacher training. Many of us came from UMass, so we do the teacher training. They do offer the course. And so there's not a national registry for much mindfulness-based programs yet in our country. So for MBCT, Zindel Siegel created MBCT Access, and it's meant to be an international registry of MBCT teachers. And he requires 20 hours of supervision. A lot of that is based on what's happened in the UK. He'll take our 10 hours of mentoring because he knows our program.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with Zindel. Zindel and I are also working with a couple of other MBCT teachers here to create a North America alliance of MBCT teachers. We're trying to build the community. We were recently in the UK, they had a celebration of 30 years of MBCT. Mm-hmm. And it was a beautiful thing for me to be with a community of like all of these like healthcare workers and clinicians and MBCT teachers. I'm used to that community in the US for MBSR, but we've not yet developed it for MBCT. So we're getting this started here. We all got inspired when we were there. So we're moving that here.
One more question.
Please.
When you were listing the prerequisites, I saw one of them, a graduate degree in education.
So some people in the education field are working as like in some sort of support services with people so they might be in a counseling role or an education role. So we look at the professional experience and the degree that they have and what their professional experience is to see if it fits. If you don't have that degree, but you think you have professional experience that qualifies, then I put my email in the chat.
Yeah. And
reach out to me because we do look at people on a case-by-case basis. And then a lot of it is then if you start teaching, being really clear about your role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Inga.
Okay. So let's see. I've taken MBSR twice with a teacher named John Patterson. Oh. Yeah, he teaches in Kentucky. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. I'm so lucky, he's offered it any returning people. So I've taken it twice and it's been really valuable, really powerful. I work not to take everyone's time, but I work in a hospital setting.
Hmm.
You know, if I applied, I would put in my credentials, all that. But I'm also sort of looking to the future of transitioning at some point, perhaps to a private practice. I have a New York State therapy license. Now, I understand this is a group. It's presented as a group practice, just, you know, the 8-week course, just like the MBSR. So I think my two questions are, number one, what do you, what has been the reception in terms of feeling like this is a respected training certificate here? And I'm asking that because I see a lot how CBT is something that they're looking for private practice skills. And I'm not that drawn to CBT, but this seemed like a good segue between things I already do and know a fair amount about and CBT. So that was what drew me. And I think I had a second question, but I guess I forgot it. So, but do you feel that even though it's designed as the 8-week course, that it would be enough practice with the skills to feel that one could utilize it, for example, like CBT practitioners utilize that with individual clients?
Yeah.
So those are my two questions.
Yeah, we're seeing more of that. And my colleague, Bill McCracken, does it individually with people. You know, so there are some individuals that they really want to go through the scaffold. They want to go through the process. And so often what people will use is the Mindful Way Through Depression workbook. And the therapist or the counselor knows the program and supports them in that. And then some group practices, you know, they see it as like an added on to whether they're offering like a DBT group or just traditional groups. You know, and quite frankly, depending on your setting, there's probably some adjustment of the time. Typically, I think MBCT would be probably 2 hours, not 2.25. And I think you would still adhere to the rigor of the curriculum in that time frame. Because I think if you're billing, you would be billing group therapy right now. And I'm working with Rick Heck out of the University of San Francisco. He's looking at getting a billing code. Eric Laux here at Brown is looking at getting a billing code. So there's movement in our country for, you know, in the UK, these, and even in our country, but like, these are considered third wave therapies, these mindfulness-based programs. And so they're just taking root here. The evidence base for MBCT, though, is like ridiculously strong. I'll just say, like, the evidence is, which is why Canada and the UK have it in their health services. There's been like really solid randomized controlled trials across a broad spectrum of individuals.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah, over decades of like,
And I could also see, like, for example, at a therapy practice, you know, outside of a hospital setting, more private practice clinic, to have the opportunity, like you said, to offer to the clients there, okay, there's going to be an 8-week group therapy offering, but then those same clients could follow up with the individual therapist to continue to reinforce and practice those same skills in the individual therapy. So that would be such a nice way anyway to really offer it to people.
We're seeing it more and more. Like it's in the VA system, the Osher Integrative Health System at San Francisco, and in Ohio State University. They have active MBCT clinics. They're doing active research on it. One of our researchers is doing research on MBCT, so it's continuing. So we see it moving. And then as our teachers get to the qualified level, I often have people come to our class saying, I'd love to take it in my community. Do you know any teachers in my community? So I love that. I'm like, yes, let me call and see when they're starting a class, and I'll refer people in their communities. Yeah. So I put my email there. So if you have questions about You know, some people are like, do I need to take it? I've taken all of these other mindfulness classes, and I think I want to jump right into the MBCT foundations that's happening, because then I think I want to be eligible for the April TAI, for example. You know, we look at that on a case-by-case basis. If you're not sure about MBCT or MBSR, then we have info sessions for MBSR, or you're welcome to reach out to me. We can set up an individual time. Since I teach and train in both, I'm happy to sort of like walk through like what might be a best place for you to start. We have an expedited training pathway for qualified to certified MBSR teachers that are eligible. It's not yet reversed if you start with MBCT.
Sorry, Patty. Last question. So if we enrolled in this MBCT class and we realize, oh gosh, like this might be not something I want to do, can we switch to the MBSR class, or once we enroll for this one, we're gonna stay for the whole time? And
So we ask that you're talking about the training now, right?
yes.
Yeah, we ask that you stay with one path.
I
That's
see.
why it would be best for someone like you to take the class to see for yourself,
I see.
to decide, or to go for MBSR and move through that training pathway until you get to until you start teaching it. You have to teach it a few times so that you're grounded in MBSR. And then you would be eligible to come into the MBCT Teacher Training Pathway at the TAI level. We accept the foundations.
I see. Makes sense.
Yeah, but you need to ground in one first. Our colleagues in the UK did sort of allow for a while people to train in both at the same time. And really what was happening is people were like delivering these mashup classes, and they were losing their efficacy because they were losing their focus.
Makes sense. Thank you for all the information.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, no. So if you have other questions, please reach out to me. You'll get this recording, you'll get a follow-up email. But yeah. Yeah, Inga.
Yes. I know that there's I know there's classes starting in January. I saw that on the website. I know there's a Wednesday night class, right, for the 8-week class. When is the 10-week, the foundations, that's 10 weeks?
Yeah, it runs parallel with the 8-week class. So the next foundations would actually be, we're not going to have a foundations in the spring. How does the seasons go? Winter, spring, summer. It would be the summer.
And I'm sorry, how often does that meet again? I know you said it.
Foundations meets weekly for 10 weeks. So foundations starts with the orientation of MBCT, first foundations class. Then in MBCT, we skip a class because we're having individual meetings. We don't skip the foundations class. That's why it goes for 10 weeks. And then we just track because we're using that lived experience.
Okay. And then the TAI for now only is happening in the spring.
Yeah.
If one was going to go to that point. So
yeah.
the 8-week course and the 10 weeks, that gets one to the first, I'll just say red column for lack of
exactly facilitator,
whichever facilitator. Okay, so that's a clear understanding of what gets one to that point. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And if you're really interested, given the background that you have and how many times you've taken MBSR, we can talk about maybe going into foundations, but I would need to learn more and have a conversation with you. So if that's something you might be interested in, feel free to email me.
Thank you. No, I would want to take the course just to, see how I felt using that modality. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I appreciate. Yeah. Good.
Anybody else? No? All right. Well, I hope to see some of you in class. And thank you for your interest and thank you for all that you do. Yeah. Good to see you all. Take good care.
Thanks for all the information.
Yeah, thank you, Ardash.